Hello, everybody. Happy July. Brett Nackman with College Autism Network here. We're glad to see so many of you. We know many of you are probably traveling or on vacation or doing a stay-at-home situation or just trying to still find some space to take a break amidst all the work. So glad you can take an hour with us today to learn. And this is a real community based environment and further demonstrated by our presenters today who will introduce in a few moments which will focus on the subject of autistic burnout. And I think it's going to be a really wonderful and reflective discussion led by Dr. Alex Newson and colleagues. So we'll look forward to that in just a few moments. A few logistical things, as I mentioned at the top of our time together, please make sure you have your name and affiliation, if applicable, documented in our meeting agenda, which I'm once again putting in the chat, just because we want to make sure that we know who's here. And hopefully you'll join us again for future meetings as well. This is our monthly venue where we share research and interesting practice happening in the world of autism, post-secondary education, and related spaces. We know many of you are probably on our listserv. That's how you heard about our presentation. Maybe you heard about it via social media. But in any case, we want to make sure you're on our listserv, so that way you are apprised of our future meetings, as well as the recordings stemming from these meetings, and as often is the case via our Canvas community, exchanging resources. If you come across a new article, if you're seeking participants for a research study, if you're wanting to discuss an issue that you're experiencing in the workplace that you feel like perhaps colleagues can give some feedback on, this is a really viable place for doing just that. And we are also really excited about our College Autism Summit, which is our annual event where many hundreds of us gather together to be in one place to share our research, our practice, our insights, and it's just inclusive of a wide variety of stakeholders, including researchers and autistic self-advocates, practitioners, educators, folks working in transition work, employers, etc. And we would welcome you to explore it further if you're interested in coming, if you haven't been before. We have a hyperlink in the meeting agenda, but I'll also put it in the chat as well. For folks who have submitted proposals for the summit, you should be hearing about that pretty shortly regarding the outcome and where your presentation may be placed if accepted. So with all that said, I want to turn it over to all of you. If you have a resource that you'd like to share with the community, if you've read an interesting article, if you come across something new, if there's something celebratory to share, we often celebrate folks' victories, whether it be graduation or a new job or something personally. This is a space where we engage in some open dialogue. So might anybody like to share a resource or celebratory thing or anything else?
Brett, I have an article that I wrote together with Solveig Shmolsky that's in this summer issue of the Journal of Post-Secondary Education and Disability on teaching neurodivergent college students. I'll put the information on that in the chat, and I'll also put my email if you have questions or difficulty getting to it if you want to access it. Brett, I think you have an article in that journal as well.
Yeah, good to be in the same space with all of you. Ken, are you aware, because I know that JPED is one where you often have to have a membership to get access to it. Is your article by chance available in a more accessible way for other folks to see?
I don't know, but if you hit a paywall, send me a note.
Okay, so everybody can send, just flood Ken's inbox so you can access the article. Great to know, Ken. Thank you. What else would folks like to share? It's hard to follow when someone publishes a new article, but let me tell you, other things are worth celebrating too. Well, I'm hopefully celebrating the fact that we're maybe reaching the peak of summer temperatures this point in the year, and maybe it will be more reasonable and comfortable for folks in the coming weeks. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's late July, August hitting the peak, but I think we're all ready for some cooler weather. All right. Well, if there are other items that folks want to share in the chat, feel free to do so. And as always, our Canvas listserv is a great space to reach a wider audience. We're at a point where it's well over 600, if not many more, members on our listserv. So that is a really great space to reach a wide audience and further get feedback from folks. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to our featured presenters for today. And I think we have a really good slate here. I'm going to pin you, Alex, so you can be the focal point right now. But we have a whole team of folks here as they discuss their work on autistic burnout and educator burnout for autistic educators in the United States. This is a participatory project. What we're going to encourage you all to do today, as always, if you have questions or thoughts, put them in the chat. Make sure that you have those documented, because if you're anything like me or many other people I know, we have a thought and then we get distracted by something else interesting and then we completely forget it. So get your thoughts and questions documented, and then Dr. Newson and the team will address them as the presentation concludes. We'll utilize at least the last 10 minutes or so of the hour, if not a bit longer, for folks' questions. But we have a team here. Alex, I'll turn it over to you to introduce your colleagues, but really thrilled to have them here, and also very appreciative to all of you for because we recognize that we delayed this meeting by a week to make sure that we could accommodate everybody. So thanks to everybody for being here. Alex, over to you.
Thanks, Brett. Hi, everyone. I just recently graduated, so to hear Dr. Newson is very strange for me. So thank you, Brett, for saying it. Every time I'm like, that's not me. So thank you. So we're here today, and I'm going to share my slides, but I'm very grateful. We have almost all of the folks who are the autistic community partners a part of this project here today. They are Jeff, Lauren, Aaron, and Liam, and then Jody Duke. Dr. Jody Duke is one of our researchers and project mentors. So we have most of our team, if not, and Madeline, I think is here as well. So we have a lot of folks here today working on our team, and Liam and I will be the one verbally presenting, but we have folks in the chat who are willing to answer questions and work with y'all if you have anything that you need. So with that, I will share my screen. So this project, this presentation rather, is titled Cultivating Community Through Research, our participatory project, exploring the experiences of autistic and educator burnout for autistic educators in the United States. And like I said, we have a large team here today. Just part of them are here and all of our names are below. We wanted to do a funding disclosure first. So this project is supported by the Health Resources and Services Administration of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services under the Autism Intervention Research Network on Physical Health grant, and that the information, content, and conclusions of this presentation should not be construed as the official endorsement or position or policy of the said groups. So, like Brett said, thank you for calling attention to this. Please use the chat to ask questions, reactions, have your video on or off, stand, move around, whatever works best for you. We will be providing my email afterwards if you want to contact the team, so don't worry. If you miss something and you want to chat with me about it, I can bring it to the team. And in the words of Advocate Lydia X.C. Brown, we honor and respect how you come to this space. We also will be using identity first language because our team prefers identity first language, but also we know that autistic folks usually do prefer that. However, individuals in the community may differ, so that there are differences, but we are guided by this checklist from Batema Patel, as well as other autistic and disabled advocates around the use of strength-based neuroaffirming anti-ableist language. So some of these questions include, would I use this conversation if I was in a conversation with an autistic person? Does my language suggest that autism is something to be fixed, cured, controlled, or avoided? Or does my language unnecessarily other autistic people by suggesting the characteristics of autism bear no relationship to the characteristics of non-autistic people? So just some questions that we are guided by. We also have a team positionality statement. We are a team of 12 consisting of 5 autistic community partners and 7 autistic, neurodivergent, and/or disabled researchers and scholars with lived and living experience teaching in K-12 settings. The team is international with members living across the United States, Canada, and the UK. All team members identify as white, and as such, we recognize that we hold spaces of privilege while also being at the intersections of marginalization due to existing within a neuronormative society. Our team's goal is to demonstrate inclusive research practices by fundamentally reimagining the roles within research projects to honor and leverage the insights, experiences, and contributions of autistic individuals throughout the research journey. So our presenters, like I said, we have folks who are in the chat who will be helping us. The 2 presenters that will be speaking orally are myself. My name is Alex Newson. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a white woman with black glasses, brown hair, and a pinkish red dress on. And I'll hand it over to Liam to describe himself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Liam Whitney. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am a white man wearing black glasses, and I have short blonde hair.
Wonderful. Thank you, Liam. So our agenda for today, we are going to be doing a quick project background and logistics of the project, which I will take the lead on, and then Liam will end our wonderful presentation with lessons learned. So because I'm a researcher, we like to have background of the literature. So first, we're talking about disabled educators. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 3.5% of those working in K-12 spaces are disabled. However, this population is often overlooked in research. We also have 2 asterisks next to that 3.5 because this only includes those who have the privilege of a formal diagnosis and feel comfortable sharing that with their employer. We know that disabled teacher candidates struggle to be successful in their higher education programs and pre-service programs due to lack of access and support, deficit ableist perceptions, differential treatment, and structural barriers, many of which are not currently being addressed in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. When we drill down deeper to autistic educators, the literature has both barriers and facilitators for autistic educators to be in K-12 spaces. I'll let you all read them, but just to highlight a few, some barriers include lack of understanding and support from administrators and colleagues, sensory needs not being met, difficulties with social and communication expectations and ableist systems. And then facilitators include greater connection and advocacy for neurodivergent and disabled students, creating problem solving, mentorship and leadership opportunities, and opportunities to focus on special interests, whether that be through their particular vocation as an art teacher or history teacher, or the things that we do in class. And one thing to note, we never blame individual autistic educators for things that are happening in their space. These are systems level issues that are happening that cause barriers in facilitators. It is important when we talk about autistic folks that we talk about autistic mental health, as autistic individuals have higher rates of co-occurring mental health needs than their allistic peers. Research is still examining why this is the case, but we do know that autistic individuals are at higher risk for suicide, with it being the 2nd leading cause of death. And research has shown that many autistic people feel like there are difficulties in accessing treatment and support due to lack of understanding and knowledge of autistic mental health, autistic burnout by providers. And research often focuses on the physical and mental health concerns rather than the experiences of autistic joy, flourishing, and thriving. As an autistic and disabled team, we were wanting to focus on that flourishing and thriving, and we'll talk about that more as we move forward. So our project aims. Aim 1 was to promote the inclusion and participation of autistic community partners by co-creating and co-producing research through emancipatory participatory research design, to explore autistic educators' experiences with autistic burnout, educator burnout, and autistic flourishing, to understand the interaction and interconnection of the phenomena on mental health and well-being, and lastly, to determine a set of recommendations to support autistic educators' mental health and well-being through preventing and reducing the negative impacts of autistic and educator burnout while promoting autistic flourishing. So basic project info, this project started in September 2023 as my dissertation project, our dissertation project funded through the AIRP, which is the Autism Intervention Research Network on Physical Health. We continue to meet bi-weekly via Zoom, and we'll talk about that in the logistics as well as lessons learned. But we completed the dissertation study in May 2023 because I needed to graduate. And we're now moving on to the rest of the data analysis, writing papers, presenting, and like today, disseminating the work. So the dissertation, we interviewed a total of 17 autistic educators from around the United States. For the dissertation, we focused on 5 folks who identified as sexually and gender diverse and had left the field of education. So that's where our themes come from, just to provide context. But we're hoping to look at the broader scope of the 17 autistic educators as we move forward with this project. So some methods and logistics. So we have, again, 5 autistic community partners. Many of them are here today. I'm so excited. We call them ACPs. 5 were selected from around the United States, and you can see the inclusion criteria to the right. I will note that we had a lot of people, a lot of fraudulent cases in this initial recruitment, because I, being a very novice researcher, included the compensation number on the recruitment flyer. For others, please don't do that. But we did find 5 brilliant, amazing autistic educators who are here today, who are predominantly white, English-speaking, high school or middle school special education teachers, and like I mentioned before, prefer identity first language. For the onboarding process, so I met with all the autistic community partners one-to-one via Zoom for the initial understanding of who they are and how they like to be involved in their project, as well as onboarding process. They were given an onboarding packet. This was an onboarding packet that folks at Drexel created, and I was able to tailor to this particular experience, which provided a general overview of the project. This wasn't like a for sure map of everything, because this was a co-produced project, but just the basic underpinnings of what we were doing. How to provide feedback as we were meeting via Zoom. What does that look like? A preferences survey about how they would like to communicate, who would they like to communicate to, preferences around time of day, as well as an availability survey, and then our proposed expectation agreement. I am autistic, and so I prefer having really clear expectations for when I come into meetings of what am I supposed to do? What is my role? How am I supposed to ask questions, etc. And this was our proposed expectation agreement that we talked about together to say this is what the rules are for these meetings. This is how we connect with one another, how we resolve disagreements, how we think about moving forward to next steps and roles and responsibilities. So all that was reviewed with the autistic community partners in this packet. And folks, if you have any questions about that, ask the autistic community partners, because they know more than I do about this type of stuff. We also, all the settings, like I mentioned, occurred online. So research meetings were completed via Zoom, materials were in a shared Dropbox, and then emails sent to the group via agenda and things like that. For the research design, we used participatory methods using the tenets of participatory action research, community-based participatory autism research to collaborate with the autistic community to co-develop and co-create research through inclusive and emancipatory methodologies. Emancipatory is used purposefully here. So we provided training and skills to the autistic community partners that they can take on their own research. We have folks here who are doctors and are now going to be professors at universities, as well as folks who are working in schools right now. So they're able to take those skills in whatever environment they are in. This was supported through the AIRP, through webinars and scholars, as well as one-to-one support with experts and mentors. We had Dr. Heather Brown from the University of Alberta as a great expert and support, and then Dr. Jody Duke was a wonderful support as well throughout this project. We used constructivist philosophy influenced by the principles of social justice, critical disability studies, and the neurodiversity paradigm. These were all things that we discussed as a team about what we want the philosophy to be, and talked about that extensively in our meetings. For activities, we included this as a team because it can get very confusing about who are the autistic community partners and who are the autistic educators, because all of our autistic community partners are autistic educators. So it could get very confusing. So this will help us delineate between the two groups. The autistic community partners were a part of all aspects of this research, from all the team meetings to the research one-on-one training, which we'll talk about in a moment, from data analysis, survey creation, recommendation synthesis, dissemination of work. Every part of this project, they were able to have their hands in if they would want. The autistic educators were true participants, so we just interviewed them and they completed surveys, but weren't a part of the rest of the research process. In terms of procedures, so we have ACP team meetings, which are the ACPs and the research team all together twice a month. They're about approximately an hour in length. I try to make sure it's an hour, but they are very kind. And sometimes we go over a little bit because we get so excited about things. We completed the quality indicator questionnaire. This was administered in November and March. This is from Morrow and colleagues, which allows you to share with your community partners or for folks that you're working in participatory research with, for them to provide their viewpoints and perspective on the quality of your participatory research. And this was a really helpful tool because in November, we realized we were not doing well in terms of roles and responsibilities. We were able to talk about that with the team. And then in March, those scores went up because we had that discussion about it and came together as a team to look at our quality. We also have informal check-ins, including the stop, start, continue method from Hoon and colleagues, the 5-finger vote method from Nicolaitis and colleagues, and one-to-one Zoom calls, which we'll talk about in the logistics as well as lessons learned. And then meeting notes and materials were in a secure Dropbox folder that was shared with everyone. One thing that was really amazing that we got to do with the assistance of Dr. Jackie Ryan is a Research 101 training. She created this training with Dr. Sue Fletcher Watson in the UK, focusing on 3 online modules that were about the research process, ethics, data analysis, and implementation of participatory research. We were able to tailor it a little bit to our own group and what we wanted to talk about in terms of our process and the way that our positionality and what does that mean. But this training was wonderful. And I know Dr. Jackie Ryan is working on this, so it is not my work, but if you have any questions about that, please let me know and I'd love to connect you with Jackie. This process had 2 phases. The first phase was the interview questions. We co-developed these questions as a team, and you can see some sample questions to the right in that box. We also co-created definitions for autistic burnout, educator burnout, and autistic flourishing as a team that we shared with the autistic educators to help them through the interview process. We will be reviewing those definitions in a moment. In our interviews, this was conducted by myself and Artistic RA Madeline, which helped a lot of folks reducing the double empathy problem and helping people understand what was being asked and reducing communication difficulties. Many autistic educators stated that it was wonderful to be able to talk to another autistic person about things that were very personal. These were an average of an hour in length, and again, focus on the lived experiences and perceptions and desires of the autistic educators who we had interviewed. For the analysis piece, we use reflexive and template thematic analysis following the 6-sequence guide and 20-step reflexive questions from Braun and Clark. So this included analytic memoing and bracketing, and they were analyzed with the ACPs through an iterative process, which is here. So what happened is Madeline and I read the transcripts. We did some additional memoing and coding, and then generated some themes. Those themes were that brought to the group, and we discussed it extensively with visuals, with examples. The group then provided synchronous or asynchronous feedback. So we talked about it in the team meetings, but also folks could provide comments on slides or email me separately. From those comments, we then went back to the transcripts to see what we could see if there were any questions or any disagreements, and did this process over and over about 3 or 4 times to come up with the themes that we finally did. So some applied examples that we have. The first example that we have is from the definitions that I talked about previously. So our first definition was for educator burnout. We looked specifically at Maslach and Schwab's work, which you can see the 3 constructs here, and autistic burnout. And we were heavily influenced by Dr. Dora Raymaker and colleagues' definition, as well as Dr. Higgins' definition. And so we created these 2 definitions from those research. So what we did as a team is I brought the research forward. We talked about it. I then brought a draft to the team. The draft was fairly sparse and just had some basic language. The team is amazing. One, they checked all my grammar, which was so helpful, but also they were like, that doesn't make sense to my experience. Many of the ACPs here had experienced educator burnout or autistic burnout and wanted to include that lived experience into these definitions. So we would bring it to the group. Folks would either synchronously or asynchronously provide feedback. For example, when we talk about emotional exhaustion, some folks were like, we need to provide examples to folks because that makes no sense to me. Hence why we have a lot of examples in this draft. Also for educator burnout, there was a really wonderful conversation about folks maybe rethinking or regretting their choice of becoming an educator, which we hadn't seen in other burnout definitions. So that was different in this one. And the same for autistic burnout. I brought an initial idea of what we would like to define autistic burnout as. Folks were like, nope, we need to include exhaustion versus fatigue versus capacity, and change the words around to make it make sense to our team and our lived experience. The one that's a little bit different is autistic flourishing. So there's no one definition for autistic flourishing, but conceptualizations are present in the positive psychology literature around flourishing. For example, folks may be familiar with a 5 subscale model of PERMA and others. There are new articles talking about this. I just looked before this presentation. There's one that came out this month from Chow and Cooper, a review of autistic strengths, and another one that came out this year from Deacon and colleagues around the critical reflection of autistic definitions and well-being. But our team at the time was looking at the foundations of autistic flourishing from Pelicano and Hayworth, which include autistic well-being being more prominent in research, highlighting autistic autonomy, focusing on everyday experiences, acknowledging the context in which autistic people live, and working in partnership with autistic individuals in their communities. So again, there needs to be this ability to work with a diverse set of autistic community members rather than using traditional models, which is why I think it's really awesome that a team of autistic and disabled people from diverse backgrounds came for this definition, which is the experience of positive physical and psychological well-being, individually defined by the autistic person, but encapsulates an overall quality of life where an autistic person can thrive and feel supported, safe, and secure within their environment. And many autistic educators had not experienced autistic flourishing before, but when they saw this definition, were like, oh, that's what it is. Maybe I can find that within my teaching or find that within my life. And that was true for the other definitions. It was helpful for them to have the something to ground upon to understand what their experiences were, because the burnout, educator burnout, and autistic burnout are so intermingled and intertwined, it can be difficult to parse out what is what. The second example that we did that I want to provide is the theme creation. So what we did for the themes is I looked at the literature to see what would be relevant when talking about autistic burnout, autistic flourishing. And we used 3 separate literature bases. One was the space model from Doherty and colleagues. Another one was Bronfenbrenner's ecological model of the different systems, micro, macro, individual, and then the jobs, demand, resources model. So this was our initial idea, our framework of like, how do we combine these together? We have random boxes, random arrows. We weren't sure what this was. So this is what we brought to the team. The team then had a lot of explanations and ideas of like, we think it should be a bidirectional arrow, or we think that there should be circles instead of boxes, which brought us to this. So our new framework idea, we were able to, I created a PowerPoint slide deck with each individual partner having their own slide. So this new framework idea allowed folks to move the pieces on the slide around to create their own idea of what the conceptual framework should be. So we again have the Bronfenbrenner systems here, the job, demand, resources, and then our general themes that we were thinking. There was lots of ideas about what this was. But here's an example of what Aaron did. I love this. Aaron was like, I don't think they should be out here. I think they should be in the actual model. And we had a discussion about why they were brought there. What does it mean that they're outside versus inside the model? And what does it mean to change some of these things around? So allowed folks to actually move and interact with models and research in a way that's a little bit different than just explaining it orally. Which brought then us to our themes. So again, we were very heavily influenced by Daughtry's space model. Ours is the space-y model. We have an extra E. So these themes include sensory experiences, people and interactions, agency, climate and culture, environmental factors, and embodied autistic identity. These are the themes that we use, that we shared back with the autistic educators, and they provide us a feedback on whether or not these resonated with them. In most of the case, it did. And then from there, we provided recommendations based on each of these themes for the promotion of autistic well-being and the reduction of burnout. And that brings us to lessons learned. And I'm going to give this over to Liam.
Thank you, Alex. Once again, good morning, everyone. My name is Liam Whitney, and I will cover now lessons learned from this project. So our collaboration improved our study quality. We have a participatory approach that cultivated a collaborative and interactive process that was relevant to our target audience. All of the ACPs, or those within the research team, had lived experience with complexity of teaching, or autistic burnout and or educator burnout. Thoughtful study design that considered mental health and well-being of participants and our co-researchers. And we have a resource listed on our slide here. Positive impact on team members. The ACPs reported gaining new knowledge and skills in data analysis, interview process, survey creation, and collaborative problem solving. And again, we had the Research 101 training co-facilitated by Dr. Jackie Ryan, and that helped a great deal. Training was created by autistic people for autistic people, and the ACPs reported increased knowledge in research design, ethics, logistics, and positionality. Fostering accessible meetings is key. The need to support multiple means of communication. So we have different Zoom features that we use throughout, things like polls, chat, reactions, surveys. Captions are on. Sometimes videos can be off. That's fine. Materials and the agenda were sent in advance for every meeting, and recording with transcription, minutes, and a summary was sent the day after every meeting. We also provide clear and explicit descriptions of roles, expectations, and timelines. Creating space for feedback, we had formal and informal feedback, things like the quality involvement questionnaire. We did 5-finger feedback, so if there were debates to be had, things to be discussed, we would rate things on a scale from 1 to 5 to decide whether to go forward or have further discussion. Stop, start, continue method. We had one-to-one meetings with Alex as needed, and we had the beginning of every meeting devoted to check-ins. Also, thank you very much to our team here, Dr. Heather Brown, Dr. Jody Duke, Dr. Victoria Van Utert, Dr. Jackie Ryan, Kieran Rose, Madeline Muller, Aaron Hopkins, Jeff Callahan, Lauren Collier, myself, and S. Goldman.
We wanted to give ample time for questions and comments for folks, as it was a lot of information. But again, we want to give a huge thank you to our whole team. Some of the folks could not be here today, but this is a team project. And I'm so excited that we have a lot of our autistic community partners here if y'all have any questions or comments or concerns. I will also provide, here is my email, and I'll also put it in the chat if you have any questions that you'd like to address to me that I can then bring to the team.
Alex, Liam, how wonderful you and your colleagues have accomplished so much, abundantly clear and very, very much on time in terms of being succinct with your remarks. So you packed a lot in, and I think there's a lot to disentangle. So yeah, let's turn it over to our community and see what's on their minds.
Alex, we had a question about the Research 101. It looks like it's shareable. Is there an easy to access link, or is it easier for us to share that?
Yeah, I can find it. The link.
Maybe we could put it in the agenda after too, to
Yeah,
disseminate it that way.
I will say that, so Dr. Jackie Ryan created the initial Research 101 training with Dr. Sue Fletcher Watson in the UK, but she is revising that and is hoping to provide an open access resource soon. This resource was originally for folks, she works mainly with autistic individuals with intellectual disability. So it is the ability to be adapted for all different types of autistic people. But I can see if I can find the link for the original training because it was from the University of Edinburgh. So
I can work on that.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't want to take space from others, but I want to maybe give you all an opportunity, if you'd like, since there's some time right now, to maybe dive into some of the themes, the spacey findings. I'm not sure if anybody on the joining us today would like to elaborate on what you all discovered.
We can definitely share. Would it be helpful for me to show the slide again so people can see, Brett?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I'll do that. Because speaking in space is difficult, at least for me it is.
Yeah, because I wonder if sharing some more about the themes may spark some additional thoughts among people joining us today.
So we had, again, 6 themes. Sensory experiences include like the immediate sensory experiences that folks are experiencing, but also include interoception, proprioception, etc. And these are things related to how folks were, how often schools are spaces that are sensory nightmares. So this sensory issues not just only include like the smells are too much or the sound is too much, but it's one individual stated that like the sound overlap was too much. So the idea that it's not just the amount of sound in your space, but the sound from their classroom and then the cacophony from the music room and then how loud it is in the gym and the traffic from outside. That's when we talk about sensory experiences. For people interactions, this includes interactions with students and staff, both positive and negative, that made them feel supported or unsupported. So some examples can be the connection that they have with students. Every single autistic educator said the reason that they wanted to stay in education was students. They loved working with students, but it was hard a lot of the times receiving support from admin as well as their own teachers who are often misunderstood their communicational cues or were outwardly disrespectful, ableist. When it comes to agency, we talk about the ability for someone to have make their own choices within their classroom, make their own choices within their environment. Climate and culture includes includes like school culture, as well as a little broader societal culture. Many of these folks, like I mentioned, were sexually and gender diverse and talked about the intersection of ableism and homophobia and how they were unable to share the fact that they were trans and also autistic. They had to choose which identity they would share because they were afraid of how people would perceive them. Environmental factors included things like the ability to the transportation. Some educators did not live in the same city that they taught because the cost of living within that space was so high. So transportation issues were a big difficulty. Or one educator just asked, "Can I please just have walls in my school?" They had cubbies for walls, and their like dream was to have walls in their classroom. And then embodied autistic identity was this discussion of many of these folks were late diagnosed and understanding their journey to identification, their journey of being autistic and what that meant to them, that they saw it as a strength, that they saw it as a part of their personhood, but also that there aren't many examples of autistic folks in the world who are trans or those who are educators. Who are autistic, they're openly autistic. There's like a group of folks kind of being neurodivergent in their own ways, but maybe not outwardly expressing that. If we need more examples, let me know.
That's great. Thank you, Alex. What other questions are emerging for folks right now?
I had one thought. Thank you, Alex and Liam and the whole team. This is just super amazing and important work. I was curious if you could talk a little bit about how you see, like, if there is reception on the part of schools or places where these educators are working to receive some of these findings, or like how you could see sort of the application from an advocacy standpoint. I feel like there's not a lot of conversation around autistic educators and sort of what needs to be known about experiences on the ground in the classroom.
That's a great question, Lauren. I think from our experience, a lot of autistic educators are starting to be open about their identities within their spaces, but it's a long process. To receive accommodations is very, very difficult. They're often questioned for their accommodations. So they're seeking out more of affinity groups. So for example, some spaces have affinity groups for like larger districts have affinity groups for neurodivergent folks. So broad range of people. We have colleagues, Dr. Heather Brown is in Canada, and we work with folks in there who have like larger affinity groups and agenda changes that they meet regularly. So there's changes happening. However, there's a constant perception that there are not autistic educators present in spaces. That even when I started this work and we started this work, when I tried to bring this up as my dissertation focus, many people said, "You're not going to find any." And that's just wholly untrue. There's a lot of us everywhere. We're omnipresent, just living in spaces. And so I think the first step is to talk with districts and schools about their disability model. are they still in a medical model framework? And that makes it difficult for people want to share their identity. Because if you're asking them to be cured or fixed, why would they want to be in that ridicule type of and judgment type of space? So I individually, outside of this group, have done some professional development around that for folks. And almost every single time, there are people at the end that come up to me like, I'm autistic, but I didn't want to tell anybody. It is so wild that there's another autistic person coming in. I see Liam nodding and other people nodding about that as well. So I think first is just like disability models and being aware that there's actually autistic people present. And then we can talk about support. And our goal when we have these recommendations, we have recommendations for individual systems. So recommendations for individuals, recommendations for schools, and recommendations for districts and in larger society that we're working on writing up. So know that we have specific recommendations for groups because the onus should not be on autistic educators to be the champions for their own work. That leads to burnout. And so we don't want them to be the ones having to like constantly advocate for themselves in an environment that's not conducive to them being a whole person.
If I can add to that a little bit, Alex, it's exactly what she's saying, but the other part that I think is important is teacher preparation programs. And we are working on that a little bit as well, because from my perspective, as someone who prepares special educators, I'm seeing more and more neurodiverse students who are struggling in their clinical practice work. And so really looking at how can we be proactive from the very beginning of their engagement with schools. And it's incredible how hard it is to find a mentor teacher, a university supervisor, people who are open to UDL and other measures that to this group probably seem really common sense, but those accommodations sort of conveying into that clinical practice are really challenging. So that's an area of great need as well.
Thank you for bringing that, Jody. Totally. A lot of the educators here, some of them reached out to me who wanted to be a part of this project, but couldn't because they weren't certified teachers, because they didn't get through their pre-service program, because they were unable to meet the expectations or were told that they were not meeting expectations for their teaching time. And so there's that group is definitely there. I also want to address the question, and thank you, Lauren, for answering it as well, from Mary talking about whether educators discuss their autistic identity to their students and the facilitators and barriers to doing that. Some did disclose that they were autistic to their students because their students were autistic or they wanted to share that identity. Some were more broad in saying that they were neurodivergent, maybe not that they were autistic. The students had no issue with it and actually were fine with it. It's usually the parents and the school staff that had an issue with that because there's perceptions of who they are and how they teach. So teachers had to be a little bit wary about who they told. And once you tell your students, it's going to get to the parents some way or another. So they had to think about that. But I definitely agree with what Lauren said, as we had a lot of educators who were in the kindergarten and younger ages. And when they talked about there, it was age appropriate to disclosing their identity. And Madeline also she was there for all the interviews, so she has great insight as well. Any other questions that folks have for myself or the team?
Alex, this is Brett again. I'll throw in another question in terms of you referencing the products and materials that you and your teammates are developing. Do you all maybe want to talk about those in more depth?
Sure. Does anyone else want to talk about it besides me? Because I'm talking a lot, team. I do wait time, and they all smile at me because they're all so nice. So we have recommendations, but they're again only from the 5 educators that we talk to who have a very distinct background of being sexually and gender diverse and folks who have left the field. So a lot of them don't have, not because they're unable to have, but their coping strategies did not work while they were in school. So that's why they had to leave. And they are now doing other things that are away from education because of their traumatic experience while teaching, because many of them experience educator and autistic burnout to the degree where they were unable to take care of themselves. That's one thing, is that a lot of autistic educators can't stay in the K-12 system for long, just because of the toll it takes on their mental health and well-being. Our recommendations we're hoping to is to look at the broader spectrum of folks, to listen to folks who are still in the field and are able to use their coping strategies and skills in that way, and have adapted systems to make it work for them, as well as those folks who were unable to do that, not because of anything individually wrong within them, but because the systems that they were in made it difficult for them to be there. Many of them, again, multiply marginalized, as well as to talk to folks from a more diverse background. All of the folks that we talked to in our first 5, while they were sexually and gender diverse, they were white, and we want to include folks from different racial and ethnic backgrounds, and we were able in our 17 to have that. So we're hoping to provide a broader range within that. But the recommendations that they asked for, I will say, are recommendations that help all educators. So they were asking for things like, can I take a break? Can I have my lunch? Can I go to the bathroom when I want to? Can I have walls? Like, can I be respected as a teacher, as an content expert? Can I have the autonomy to think about my schedule and think about what's best for my students? And those are things that are true for all educators. So they weren't asking for things above and beyond. They're asking for things using what Jody said around universal design of learning. They're asking things that would be within the scope of universal design, either changes to the environment or changes to the way that we learn and practice that would be beneficial to all. And I think that was surprising for folks to hear, that they weren't asking for, like, fidgets to rain from the sky and, like, the wild expectations. They're very reasonable asks, but they don't feel like they're reasonable because they're being told no so many times. So it's difficult for them to share what they need in a way that would resonate with other people.
So much to dive into.
Yes.
We probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions if anything is materializing for folks.
Yeah, Jeff says one thing that I saw was asking for both clarity and flexibility. Thank you for including that, Jeff. And like I said, all of us are educators in some right, whether we were educators a while ago or currently educators, and almost all of us are autistic or disabled. So we have our own lived experience in some of these recommendations and what we would like as well, which was interesting when looking at themes. It was sometimes difficult to listen to people's perspectives, not because what they were saying was wrong, but it's so closely aligned with some of our lived experiences.
Well, I think maybe, unless is there a question?
Oh, I was just going to ask one other question, but no need if there's time. I was just thinking about this idea of autistic flourishing, and I was curious if your team found that any of your interviewees spoke about being like a model to their students around being queer, neurodivergent, or autistic, and just thinking about empowerment and the power of being a model in that space as a teacher.
That's a great question, Lauren. And Madeline might help me with this because she was there for all the interviews as well. I would say that they felt they were leaders in their space to show that there are multiple ways of communicating, multiple ways of being in classrooms. Lots of the classrooms that folks were in were like kindergarten or elementary school classrooms. So they inherently knew like flexible seating, and it's okay to show up into spaces, wiggling and moving around. And it's okay if you want to sing it, or if we want to talk about it, or if we want to write it or draw it. So allowing that UDL to be inside of classrooms, having fidgets available, they talked about that, and that it's okay to have those types of things. Many folks did not share their queer identity to their students, whether they weren't there in that space or they just didn't talk about it in the interview. But they felt like they could be examples. The problem that we had, though, was autistic flourishing. Many folks did not experience autistic flourishing. They only experienced it when they were in connection with students. But many folks really struggle to be even talk about autistic flourishing. The two themes that we found here were autistic flourishing either meant that they were regulated, which is a very low bar for someone to flourish, that they just felt like they were safe within their environment, or they were in a flow state. So they were like really in tune with their students, really in tune with the lesson, like on a roll in that space. But there wasn't a lot of examples of autistic flourishing, and there wasn't very many examples of the promotion of autistic flourishing by schools. So it was hard to be an example of autistic flourishing when they weren't experiencing that firsthand. Does that make sense, Lauren? Okay. Great question.
Wonderful. Well, I guess we'll wrap up at this point. It has been such a pleasure to learn from all of you, and seems like you have much more to distribute to a variety of different stakeholders and further dive into the data. But thank you, Alex and Liam, and your whole team of colleagues and mentors for producing all of this and really giving autistic educators further space to share their experiences and hopefully change practice too. So really wonderful work. And I know you want to share your contact information too if folks
Yes,
have
I'll put that in the
other
chat right now.
questions.
And I just want to give a huge shout out to the team. This is not my project. This is a team project. Their insight and brilliance made this project what it is. So I did this for my dissertation to say Dr. Alex Newson. Thank you, Ken. But this is a team project. And so each of these people brought so much of themselves into this work. And I'm very, very grateful that many of them are here today to be able to share that.
Wonderful. Well, we have so much to learn from you all, so please join in on future conversations and keep us all posted on the listserv as you have more insights to pass along. As for the rest of the group joining us today, Canvas group, we will see you back here, hopefully, on Friday, August 9th at 12 Eastern Time, at which point we are going to be joined by Dr. Natalie Lipster, who's a postdoc research fellow at Vanderbilt, and we'll be discussing predictors of sexual victimization among autistic and non-autistic college students. Definitely an important and always timely issue to make sense of and communicate. So we'll look forward to that presentation, and we have a whole docket of presentations lined up for y'all over the coming months. And in the meantime, we'll see you via email on the Canvas listserv, and we'll be sharing a video recording of this as well as the meeting minutes in the coming weeks. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all for being here today, and hope you have a good rest of the week.